This is a remarkable yet true and well-documented story that unfolded in 1981 in South America. It involves a young man named Yossi Ginsberg, who had recently been discharged from the Israeli army and was craving adventure. Before his trip to South America, Yossi worked several jobs to save up money for the journey. He dreamed of exploring the untamed Amazonian jungles, and he hitchhiked from Venezuela to Colombia. In Colombia, Yossi Ginsberg met a Swiss teacher named Marcus Stam. Marcus had recently been dumped by his girlfriend and hoped a short trip would help him distract himself. Together, the two traveled to La Paz in Bolivia. In this bustling city, the largest in Bolivia, the guys met one of Marcus's friends, Kevin Gale. Kevin was a photographer and an avid traveler. Yossi immediately admired Kevin's lifestyle and saw him as an authority figure. Sometime later, while still in La Paz, the three friends met a man who introduced himself as a guide named Karl Ruprechter. This Austrian claimed he would gladly take the travelers on an expedition through the poorly explored Amazonian jungles in search of a little-known indigenous village called Tacana. He promised they would get to witness the way of life of indigenous people who had little contact with modern civilization. "You're a photographer, right? With photos like these, you'll end up straight in National Geographic," Karl said, trying to entice them. Karl showed the guys the approximate location of the Tacana village on a map, indicating that the journey would take several days. To further motivate the young men to join him, he mentioned that the lands around there were rich in gold. If they found it, they could take some precious metal back with them. Soon, the men began preparing for the hike. They shopped around the city stores and bought the essential gear. They decided to travel light, planning to replenish water and food supplies directly in the jungles by foraging for fruits and bird eggs along the way. On the appointed day, 21-year-old Yossi Ginsberg and his two new friends, along with guide Karl Ruprechter, boarded a plane and flew to the town of Rarenebak, from where their trek was set to begin. Upon arriving in Rarenebak, the guys encountered local residents who tried to dissuade them from the expedition, warning that the rainy season was approaching and the jungles would become extremely dangerous. But guide Karl Ruprechter assured them he knew what he was doing and there was nothing to fear. So the group set off. First, everything went smoothly. The first day of the journey passed without any difficulties. As darkness fell, the guys set up camp for the night, cooked food, ate dinner, and went to sleep. But the next day, troubles began. It started raining, and the jungles became very damp. One might wonder, what's so dangerous about rain? The issue was that now the guys' feet were constantly in moisture, which rarely leads to anything good. Of course, they tried to dry their shoes and socks as much as possible, but it didn't help much since the jungle soil was soaked. As soon as they resumed hiking, their feet quickly got wet again. Guided by the map, the travelers occasionally stopped in various indigenous villages along the way. There, they replenished food and medical supplies before moving on. When supplies ran low, Karl began hunting monkeys. However, eating primates disgusted Marcus, and he couldn't force himself to eat even a bite. This caused problems because, compared to his friends, Marcus began weakening rapidly due to poor nutrition. A weak person in the group slows everyone down. After 5 days of the journey, there was no sign of the indigenous village Karl had promised to lead them to. Marcus was becoming a burden and delaying the whole group. After 7 days of wandering through the jungles, the friends learned from Karl that he was an Austrian criminal, and he had no real knowledge of any gold near the indigenous village. He had only heard rumors that it might be there. Yes, you heard that right. With this revelation, tension grew within the team. The weakened, hungry Marcus constantly complained about his feet, saying they were killing him. His friends thought he was exaggerating and just whining, but when Marcus took off his shoes, everyone realized it was serious. After a week of slogging through the wet jungles, Marcus had developed trench foot, open ulcers infected with bacteria and fungus. Due to poor nutrition and prolonged time on his feet, his body couldn't produce enough antibodies to fight the infections. The problem with Marcus's feet irritated Yossi Ginsberg. He was angry that it was holding them back, though he tried not to show it in front of him. "We need to make it before the rainy season, but at this pace we won't succeed," Yossi thought. "He's acting like a girl. Have you seen his feet?" Yossi understood that Marcus's feet were rotting alive. He needed urgent medical help. "I'm sorry I can't go faster, but you know I'm not doing it on purpose. It's not my fault my feet hurt." The next day, guide Carl Ruprechter told the guys they needed to turn back before Marcus's foot condition worsened. He suggested one of the guys go with him to a village a few days' walk away and then bring help for Marcus. This plan didn't appeal to Kevin, who proposed building a raft instead, so they could all travel together to a known village. The raft was built fairly quickly. The guys loaded up and set off downstream. However, problems soon arose. Carl Ruprechter began to get nervous even when the raft entered minor rapids. He panicked intensely. Turned out Carl simply couldn't swim. Eventually, his nerves gave out. He demanded they stop on the shore. Once on dry land, Carl said he wouldn't get back in the water and that they would continue on foot instead. However, Kevin and Yossi stopped obeying Carl. They didn't want to abandon the adventure and were eager to challenge the river's dangerous rapids. The others could safely return by land. Carl objected, saying it was madness because soon downstream there was a dangerous canyon where the river was too turbulent, and attempting to navigate that section on a raft would be suicide. "Don't even try. There are rocks everywhere. You won't be able to dock anywhere. You'll be corpses." Kevin replied that he and Yossi would bypass that section of the river and build a new raft to continue sailing. "I'm going back to the village. 3 days walk. Come with me or become fish food. I don't care." Thus, the guys split into 2 groups. To spare Marcus from wetting his sore feet on the raft, it was decided to send him with Carl on foot by land. In 3 days, they should reach the nearest village. Meanwhile, Kevin and Yossi planned to continue down the river. All 4 promised to meet on Christmas in La Paz. On the 10th day of the journey, the guys said goodbye to each other. Kevin and Yossi, packing an emergency backpack, jumped on the raft and began their water adventure. Kevin had navigated rapids for many years and had extensive experience, so he wasn't particularly worried when they hit turbulent waters. But Yossi was a bit scared, though Kevin's expertise calmed him. Floating down a river in the jungles during the rainy season, when currents become especially strong, is quite dangerous, and nature soon demonstrated this. The guys didn't even realize it when they found themselves on a particularly turbulent section of the river. Before them was the very deadly canyon Carl had warned about. The current pulled them in. Paddle right. Hard right. The raft got pinned against a rock right in the middle of the river under a powerful water flow. Could break loose any second, and the guys would be swept away by the river. Yossi had little time to think. He had to act very quickly. I saw fear in his eyes for the first time. I was stunned because he had been my support, and now my idol was in a desperate position. In desperation, Kevin came up with a crazy idea. "Swim to the shore. I'll throw you a machete, and I'll pull you out." Kevin didn't hesitate and dove into the deadly turbulent stream. Amazingly, by some miracle, the water didn't drag him under, and he reached the shore. After that, Kevin shouted for Yossi to throw him the machete so he could cut a vine. But as soon as Yossi threw the machete, the raft broke free from the rock. A massive wall of water carried him through the rapids. Kevin quickly lost sight of him. Yossi was pulled underwater. The guy was carried far downstream. After an eternity underwater, I was pushed to the surface. I took the most precious breath of air in my life. Yossi ended up on the other side of the canyon, 3 kilometers from Kevin. And from this moment begins the astonishing survival story of Yossi Ginsberg, left alone in the middle of the Amazonian jungles. Having climbed out and come to his senses on the shore, the guy realized that several kilometers of rocky canyon separated him from Kevin. He went back, hoping to find him, but night was quickly approaching in the jungles, where nothing is visible in the dark, and the guys wouldn't hear each other's shouts over the river's loud roar. So Yossi settled in for the night and decided to resume the search early in the morning. At dawn, he heard a metallic sound coming from the river. It turned out to be the emergency backpack bobbing in a small eddy. Luckily, Kevin had tied empty tin cans to it so it didn't sink. When Kevin packed the backpack, he said, "Put all the essentials in it," and tied empty tins to the backpack so it wouldn't sink. In the backpack were a lighter, a raincoat, insect repellent spray, some rice, and most importantly, a map. Now Yossi had hope of returning to civilization. Thrilled with the find and inspired, he set off energetically to search for his friend. However, several hours passed, and he couldn't find Kevin. Yossi had already walked the entire canyon in the opposite direction, but there were no signs of his friend. The rainy season constantly reminded him of itself, with downpours crashing down with enviable regularity. The raincoat found in the backpack made things much easier. They say the scariest thing in the jungles is at night, the forest full of unfamiliar sounds. For Yossi, falling asleep alone in such a place was a real nightmare, and these fears were not unfounded. A terrifying beast was on his trail. The next morning, Yossi Ginsberg pulled himself together, realizing he was now on his own. He unfolded the map and began thinking. Suddenly, he remembered how Carl had said there was a gold mine 4 days' walk upstream. Yossi cheered up, thinking he could reach it in a couple of days, and from there easily find his way out. Stocking up on food and water, Ginsberg set off, filled with optimism. If you're lost near a river, there's a golden rule. Follow the stream, and sooner or later, you'll find people, as they always settle near water. One night, something terrifying happened. Yossi heard a strange, suspicious crunch of branches and rustle of leaves nearby. It was a jaguar. For these animals, killing a human is as easy as spitting. Many would freeze in fear on the spot, but he managed to compose himself and quickly grabbed the insect repellent spray and lighter. He knew animals fear fire, and this saved his life. The predator ran away. The next morning, Ginsberg continued his journey. The enormous number of mosquitoes and other blood-sucking insects was killing him. The prospect of being bitten by some spider, scorpion, becoming prey for a predator, or encountering a venomous snake wasn't encouraging either. Most of the way, Yossi went hungry. He had no survival skills or knowledge of foraging in the jungles. Only occasionally did he find various fruits, berries, and bird eggs. Days passed, and one day, walking further and further along the river, Yossi saw a tree with machete notches and was overjoyed, assuming these were marks left by Kevin for him. "I became clear to me. Kevin reasoned like me. He knew I'd try to find the mine. He thought it was Kevin's boot print. Only one person in the world could leave it. It wasn't Kevin's print. It was a terrifying truth. The print belonged to Yossi. He had been walking in circles all day. He shouldn't have strayed far from the river. Stick to the river." 2 weeks had passed since Yossi Ginsberg got lost in the Bolivian jungles. It was December. At this time, the rainy season reaches its peak here. The hot, moisture-saturated air of the jungles rises high up and gathers into heavy storm clouds. Not just heavy rains, torrential downpours. Rain lashes like from a bucket. The swollen Amazonian rivers overflow their banks. A stream of enormous water mass headed toward the sleeping Yossi. When he woke up, it was already too late. Only by morning did the torrential flood end. Yossi was carried very far from the river, his only hope for salvation. 3 weeks after he got lost, his only food for the last 3 days after the flood had been half-rotten fruits and rare raw bird eggs. He had fever, hallucinations, and weakness from hunger. But one day, something incredible happens. Yossi stumbles upon a girl lost in the jungles from an indigenous village. The chance of 2 lost people randomly meeting in the jungles is 1 in a trillion. "Don't be afraid, please. I won't hurt you. Don't run away. Don't be scared." Yossi tried in every way to help and encourage this girl. She herself gave him energy. At night, they slept in warmth, and he tried to protect her. "I know it's not much, but it's better than sleeping on the ground." Days passed, and Yossi could barely move. The pain in his feet drove him mad. He himself didn't understand how he was still holding on. "This will be safer. It'll be a couple of nights." The mere presence of the girl nearby calmed him until one day he realized the terrible truth. It was a hallucination, a vision caused by fever and exhaustion. Yossi Ginsberg later talked about this girl in interviews, and she was mentioned in one of his books. One night, an enormous colony of ants attacked the unfortunate man. Sleeping on the ground turned out to be a mistake. Ants' leafcutters swarmed all over his body. They're not poisonous, but their scissor-like jaws easily gnaw through leaves and strip skin in strips. One colony can number about 8 million of these ants. The guy started shaking them off as best he could, but the most nightmarish was that the light around me fell as if on a bloody carpet, and everything around within 5 or 6 meters was red and wriggling. Some time passed, and the living, exhausted Yossi, already in semi-delirium, pushes through the jungles. On this day, something terrible happens. The guy falls into quicksand. Now his life is truly hanging by a thread. No sharp movements can be made, or the quicksand will suck you in faster. The swamp has claimed the lives of a huge number of people, and Yossi Ginsberg nearly joined their ranks. Fortunately, he somehow managed to get out. The funniest part is that sometime later, he managed to fall into the swamp again and got out once more. Meanwhile, Kevin continues searching for help to find Yossi. He asks a local resident to take him into the jungles on a boat. Couple more days pass. Yossi looks like a walking corpse. His feet are swollen and turned into chunks of blood and pus. My feet were no longer feet. He gave up. I prayed, Lord, let me die. I just want to rest. A month had passed since Yossi and his friends set off on their jungle journey. Completely exhausted, he lay on the riverbank waiting for his death. Suddenly, Ginsberg heard a suspicious sound. It seemed to him like the buzzing of some insect. Lifting his head, Yossi saw Kevin Gale on a boat with a guide. The guy barely stood on his feet and approached the river. He had no strength left to shout. Kevin noticed him on the shore himself. I was in such a state, understanding nothing. I see like a flash Kevin. He's already nearby. I fall on him, and we stand hugging and crying non-stop. I couldn't believe we found him. If he had been just 100 meters upstream, he wouldn't have heard us, and we wouldn't have seen him. What started over a month ago as an exciting expedition for 3 friends craving adventure and one persuasive guide with ulterior motives turned for Kevin and Yossi into 20 days of survival struggle. However, this story doesn't have a completely happy ending. Soon after Yossi's rescue, when the guys returned to La Paz, it turned out that Marcus and Carl hadn't made it out of the jungles. Learning of this while still recovering in the hospital, Kevin Gale, horrified, rushed back into the forest, taking Bolivian army soldiers with him. Kevin searched for the missing for several weeks, but to no avail. Neither Carl nor Marcus was ever seen again. Moreover, the military discovered that no indigenous village Carl had promised to show existed. As it turned out, Carl was wanted by the police. It wasn't the first time he led travelers on a hike and abandoned them in the middle of the jungles. No one could have imagined that the guys parting on the riverbank was the last time they saw each other. It's unknown exactly why Carl took the guys on the hike. I was told that Carl led people into the jungles and abandoned them there. It happened multiple times. I was also told he's alive and hiding in Bolivia. I was stunned. This is a real photo of Yossi Ginsberg after the rescue. He spent 3 months recovering in the hospital. And here he stands with Kevin Gale and the local who helped search for him. After this incident, Kevin's passion for travel didn't fade, and he continued exploring all corners of the world and pursuing photography. Now he's married with 3 children. As for Yossi Ginsberg's life, it turned out like a true hero's. 10 years after his rescue, he returned to the Bolivian jungles for a month, where he helped the residents of the indigenous village San Jose secure a grant of $1,250,000 to build solar panels in the jungles and taught the locals how to use them. Soon he returned again and lived with the local residents for 3 years. During this time, he helped them build eco-lodges, a medical center in Bolivia's national park Madidi, thereby organizing a thriving ecotourism business. Yossi Ginsberg also defended the intellectual property of the indigenous peoples of this region. He established contacts between local residents and the International Conservation Society and became a co-founder of a biodiversity search campaign in the Amazon basin. Also, since 1995, Yossi Ginsberg has built 12 drug addiction treatment clinics in various parts of the world, from Mexico to China. Then he participated in Israeli-Palestinian reconciliation. And Yossi would never have accomplished all these good deeds if he hadn't been rescued in the Amazonian jungles. Yossi also wrote 3 books about his survival. About this story, the Discovery Channel made a documentary film in 2005. As for Hollywood, Filming a feature film based on these events took a long time to negotiate with Ginsberg because filmmakers wanted to change the plot for greater spectacle. But Yossi refused out of respect for the memory of the deceased Marcus. Only many years later did they reach an agreement, and in 2017, the film Jungle finally hit the screens, in which Yossi Ginsberg was played by Daniel Radcliffe, known for his role as Harry Potter. The film itself turned out surprisingly accurate, though some interesting episodes of the story didn't make it in. That's all. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and watch the 2 previous videos.